Welcome back everyone to this practice episode on c-betting medium strong hands in position as the pre-flop aggressor. In this lesson you're going to learn more about c-betting in position with three main categories in our range and find out when to check and when to bet. Let's jump right into the action. First of all, overpairs on Queen 8-4 rainbow. Remember, we open raise from the cutoff and the big blind is calling. An overpair we are checking is ace king 10. An overpair that we are betting on the other hand is ace 6-5. Now what is the difference here, because both hands have the overpair of aces and both hands have the backdoor nut flush draw? Well, the difference here comes from the additional equity in the form of the straight draw with the right hand. Overpairs on rainbow flop textures that have at least two additional components increase significantly in value and are therefore great candidates to start betting. In addition to that, the 5-6 combination with the ace 6-5 has better connection to the board and is blocking more of our opponent's check raising range. Let's look into another example. Here we see king jack 7, a hand that we are checking, while king queen 10 is a bet. Now why is that? Because both hands have the overpair of kings and both hands have the backdoor king I flush draw. Well, the difference here comes from the blocker value. Blocking top pair is a significant asset in the right hand, because we are now blocking some of our opponent's best made hands like top set and top 2 pair, and therefore reducing the chance of getting check raised. If we now bet this hand, it's much more likely we actually get value from a hand that we dominate and that is weaker than ours. The left hand, king jack 7, is much more vulnerable towards check raise because we don't have any of those blockers. And therefore we rather go for a pot control because we really don't want to get check raised with this specific holding. Let's look into some top pair examples. Ace king queen 10 is a hand we check. Ace queen jack 3 is a hand we bet. What is the difference here? We already know that it's not coming from the additional equity because these hands don't have great additional equity, both of them actually. The difference here comes in the fact of the playability once we check back. Remember that a lot of our medium strong hands have a high incentive to check back and pot control. Keep the pot small, especially if they have reasonable playability once checking back. Now if the playability once checking back gets worse and isn't as great, we often have incentive to bet in the hope to make our opponent fold, especially if we have reasonable blockers to make our opponent fold. Which is the case with the right hand, because we're blocking top pair while also blocking with the jack some of the straight draws our opponent might call or check raise us. So the right hand is going for a bet, folding against a check raise obviously, but wouldn't leave as much EV on the table if it would bet fold there. On the other hand, the left hand, ace king queen 10, would suffer much more from a check raise on the flop because the playability once checking back is much better. We have two overcards to the board with the ace king, we can turn a straight draw, and we have overall better coverage on the turn facing a potential bet or even delayed c-betting ourselves. So we have a check and a bet here, pretty clear. Another example is queen jack 10-6. We have top pair and a nut gut shot. We are checking back. On the other side we are betting with queen jack 10-7. Also top pair with the nut gut shot, but this time we also have the backdoor flush draw. Now very similar to with the overpair examples, top pair on rainbow flop textures holding at least two additional components are often an incentive to start betting because they are strong enough to do so and the EV of betting is quite good there. This hand has enough additional components and enough runouts that they can continue bet on, holding the nut gut shot and also the backdoor flush draw. The difference here is the additional equity as mentioned. The left hand would suffer much more from a check raise because we cannot continue against a check raise. The hand is much more vulnerable while holding still reasonable playability once we check. So the left hand is a check, not strong enough to bet. The right hand has the additional components altogether to justify a bet and even continue against a check raise. Finally, let's look at some middle pair examples. Ace king 8-7, two backdoor flush draws is a check, while ace jack 8-6, two backdoor flush draws is a bet. What is the difference here? Because both hands are very similar in a way. The difference here comes from the playability when checking back. The left hand has much more incentive to see a turn, holding two overcards to the queen and therefore more potential to turning two pair, actually to a strong two pair, for example ace 8 or king 8. We obviously have the two backdoor flush draws also, which is quite good. While the right hand has less incentive to actually see that turn because we don't have those two overcards to the board and therefore we can't turn as many good two pairs on the turn there. We obviously have the 2 backdoor flush draws, but that also helps us to have some equity and some good turns if we do decide to bet here, which is what we should do. In addition to that, the ace-jack, by holding the jack, is blocking some of our opponent's continuing range by blocking some of his straight draws he can call with, or he can even check raise us with. So the right hand is a bet here, and the left hand is a check. Remember, medium strong hands, like the one on the left, that have the ace-king in addition to that as 2 overcards to the board, often have a high incentive to check back, because they can turn such a good 2-pair hand. Finally, a hand like 10-9-8-7, no backdoor flush draw, but holding a gut shot is a check back, and 10-9-8-7 with 2 backdoor flush draws here is a c-bet. The difference here is the additional equity in the runouts. The right hand has more equity and much better runouts down the road once we bet. This hand can also much easier call a check raise, while the left hand would suffer a lot from a check raise. We cannot really comfortably call there, but we have decent playability once we check. Now I hope these 3 hand categories gave you some insights and some ideas about when to bet and when to check with medium strong hands. I want to tell you that it will always be some sort of a struggle sometimes to decide betting or checking with medium strong hands. Therefore, I want you to test some more here. First of all, we have another video. I recommend you to check it out, where we do similar like this, but then on 10-9 deuce rainbow. You can find it in the next video. And secondly, I will upload this specific board texture into the bucket tool, as we call it now. And you can train yourself on this specific flop texture and learn more about what hands are actually a medium strong bet on this board and when to check. I hope this helped you, gave you some clarification, and I will see you in the next video where we learn more about betting medium strong hands on 10-9 deuce rainbow. See you there.